The string quartet played softly in the background as I adjusted the simple navy dress I'd chosen for my cousin Emma's wedding. Nothing flashy, just enough to blend in. That's how I'd always operated: stay quiet, work hard, let others take center stage. My father, Robert Hartley, stood by the champagne fountain in his tailored tuxedo, commanding his usual circle of business associates. At 58, he wore authority like a second skin. Senior Vice President of Operations at Meridian Industries, the city's largest manufacturing conglomerate, he was the living embodiment of old-school success, firm handshakes, firm beliefs, and even firmer expectations. From across the room, I watched him gesture animatedly, likely retelling, for the 100th time, how last quarter's record profits were the direct result of his strategic brilliance. My mother, Patricia, stood poised beside him in a sleek designer gown, nodding dutifully while scanning the room for more important people to charm. Then came Marcus, champagne in hand, his wife Christina glued to his side like a luxury watch. At 35, my brother was the blueprint of parental ambition realized: Harvard MBA, VP at Goldman Sachs, Fifth Avenue penthouse, and a wife whose family practically owned Martha's Vineyard. "Alex," he said, using the nickname he knew I disliked. "Didn't expect to see you here, thought you'd be holed up with that little computer thing of yours." I took a slow sip of wine, let it slide. Emma's wedding, wouldn't miss it. Christina laughed, a sharp, brittle sound like wind chimes caught in a storm. "Marcus says you're in tech. That must be cute. Is it profitable?" Before I could respond, Victoria arrived. At 32, my sister had checked every family box: top-tier real estate attorney, surgeon husband, 2 private school-perfect children. She looked at me with that well-practiced blend of curiosity and quiet judgment. "We're talking about Alex's hobby?" she said, arching an eyebrow. "Mom mentioned you're still in that little downtown apartment, still figuring things out?" I'd heard this refrain for 8 years, ever since I turned down the consulting job Dad had arranged at McKinsey. Since I chose a PhD in quantum computing over a corner office and catered boardrooms. What they didn't know, that little project had transformed quantum error correction, unlocking computing potential the industry once thought was decades away. What they didn't know, I'd made the Forbes 30 under 30 list 3 months ago. What they didn't know, Microsoft had just offered $2.8 billion to acquire my startup, Quantum Dynamics. But I'd learned to keep things close. The more they knew, the more they'd try to shape me. "I'm doing well," I said. Marcus scoffed. "Living paycheck to paycheck in a shoebox doesn't count as well, Alex." "It's Alexandra," I corrected, knowing it wouldn't matter. Just then, Dad's booming voice cut through the room. He was striding toward us with a tall, distinguished man I recognized immediately: Jonathan Petton, CEO of Meridian Industries, Dad's boss and, more importantly, the man who held the keys to his career. "Jonathan," Dad said, clapping a hand on my shoulder with the kind of forced affection he reserved for social optics. "Meet my youngest, Alexandra. She's dabbling in tech these days." He smiled tightly, as if the introduction itself were an apology. "This is she's into some kind of thing, computers." The jab landed, as always, small, practiced, and sharp. I smiled and offered my hand. "Pleasure to meet you." Jonathan studied me, brow furrowed, and pulled out his phone. He scrolled quickly, then stopped. "Wait a moment, aren't you?" His eyes lit up. "This month's Forbes? Quantum computing?" Dad froze. Jonathan turned the screen around. There it was, my Forbes cover. Professional headshot. Equations in the background. Bold headline: "Alexandra Hartley, the 28-year-old who cracked quantum computing's code." Silence rippled through the group like a dropped wineglass. Marcus's flute hung midair. Victoria blinked, stunned. Christina clutched Marcus's arm, visibly rattled. Dad stared, speechless, as Jonathan read aloud. "CEO and founder of Quantum Dynamics, developed the breakthrough algorithm solving quantum error correction. Microsoft just made a $2.8 billion acquisition offer." He looked at me, incredulous and impressed. "You solved the coherence issue?" I nodded. "Among other things." "My God," Jonathan said, turning to my father. "Robert, Do you realize what your daughter's achieved? Her work could redefine drug development, financial modeling, even AI. Every tech giant is scrambling to license her system. Marcus finally spoke, his voice thin. Alexandra, why didn't you say anything? I gave him a soft smile. You never asked. You just assumed. Victoria stepped forward, her tone shifting. That Forbes article, how recent? 3 weeks ago. Jonathan answered for me. Same week Microsoft announced the deal. He held up the phone again. $2.8 billion. Christina let out a strangled sound. And then Mom appeared, pale and blinking. But, you still live in that small apartment. She must have heard the commotion. You drive that old Honda, Mom said, her voice a little too sharp with disbelief. I live modestly by choice, I replied. The apartment's actually a penthouse, but I prefer simplicity. And the Honda? It's reliable. I've never needed material things to prove my worth. Jonathan was still scrolling through his phone, captivated. Listen to this, he said, reading aloud. Dr. Hartley's groundbreaking work was conducted in near total secrecy, preferring to let her research speak for itself rather than seek attention. Despite multiple offers from major corporations, she founded her own company to maintain full control over her innovations and their applications. He looked up, astonished. Robert, your daughter is one of the most important scientific minds of this generation. Her technology could address climate change, revolutionize healthcare, even reshape global communications. He paused, the silence that followed stinging more than any shout. And you introduced her as your disappointing daughter. The words hovered in the air like smoke. Around us, the wedding continued, soft laughter, music, but this pocket of space had grown quiet. Even Emma, still glowing in her gown, was watching from across the room. Dad opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. You never asked, I said softly. 8 years ago, you decided I was a failure because I didn't take the job you secured. You never once stopped to consider that I might be building something bigger, something you couldn't imagine. Marcus set his champagne down with trembling fingers. You turned down Mackenzie. For this? I turned it down, I said, because I needed freedom. To think, to take risks, to fail without someone breathing down my neck or demanding I be someone I'm not. Victoria's expression had shifted, her calculating mind already spinning. The acquisition, $2.8 billion. What's your equity share? I smiled faintly. I retained 73% when we took funding. My stake is valued at around $2.04 billion. The number landed like a slap. Christina actually staggered. Marcus reached for a chair. $2 billion? Dad whispered. On paper, yes, but the goal was never the money. It was about solving problems that matter, about pushing boundaries that others were too afraid to touch. Jonathan was still watching Dad, his expression unreadable. Robert, how does it feel to know your disappointment just became one of the youngest billionaires in the country? The question was intentional, measured. And it hit. Dad stood frozen, not just reeling from the truth of my success, but visibly grappling with the optics. His boss, the Jonathan Petton, had just seen him dismiss the person whose name was about to redefine the future of computing. I'm proud, he managed, but it rang hollow. Are you? I asked, because 3 hours ago, I heard you telling Aunt Margaret that you wished I'd at least married well, since I clearly couldn't support myself. He flinched. Victoria looked away. Marcus stared at me like I'd grown another head. Alexandra, Mom tried to step in, voice sliding into the polished tone she used for difficult conversations. We've always been proud of you. We just didn't understand. You didn't understand, I said, because you didn't try. Every time I talked about my work, you'd change the subject or dismiss it outright. Every holiday turned into a lecture about how I'd thrown my future away. Jonathan leaned in. Dr. Hartley, if I may, what's next? Forbes mentioned you'll remain involved post-acquisition? I nodded. I'll be heading Microsoft's quantum division. We're working on applications for cybersecurity, diagnostics, global logistics, real transformative stuff. I'm also launching a foundation to fund underrepresented researchers in emerging tech fields. Extraordinary, he said. Then, to Dad, Robert, You do realize your daughter is about to change the world? Before Dad could respond, the wedding coordinator called everyone to the cake cutting. The crowd began to shift toward the main reception area, murmurs rising as the moment passed. But Jonathan lingered. Dr. Hartley, he said, handing me his card. I'd love to discuss potential collaborations between quantum dynamics and Meridian. We're looking for ways to integrate advanced systems into our manufacturing models. I'd be open to that, I replied, though you'll need to go through Microsoft's partnerships team after the deal closes. Of course. Still, impressive. Robert, he added, glancing sideways at my father. I'll expect a briefing on this at our next board meeting. I want to understand how we can align Meridian with these breakthroughs. And with that, Jonathan walked off, leaving my family in a stunned circle. Around us, music swelled and laughter resumed, but in our corner, the air remained thick. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. Alexandra, why didn't you tell us? I met his eyes evenly. Would you have believed me? Or would you have assumed I was exaggerating, like that time I tried explaining quantum entanglement at Christmas, and Dad told me to stop showing off? Victoria cleared her throat, always the attorney, always looking for the angle. The tax implications of this deal, do you have proper legal counsel? I couldn't help a short laugh. I have teams at 3 firms, patent law, licensing, international tax strategy, it's all handled. But family should help family, Mom said quietly, almost pleading. Family should support family, I corrected. There's a difference between help and support. You tried to help by fixing what you saw as my failures. What I needed was support, trust in what I knew was possible. Dad, who had been silent through most of this exchange, stepped forward. His voice was rough with something that sounded like sincerity. Alexandra, we made mistakes. I made mistakes. Can we start over? For the first time in years, I saw more than pride or disappointment on his face. I saw something real. I saw regret. I never wanted to shut you out, I said. I wanted you to trust that I knew what I was doing, even when it didn't look the way you expected. You let us think you were struggling, he said. The apartment, the car. I let you show me how you really felt about my choices. If you only became proud after finding out I was wealthy, what would that say about what you value? The silence that followed was heavier than anything anyone had said. Even Mom looked shaken. Marcus still hadn't found words. He was trying to process everything, the Forbes cover, the billions, the fact that the sister he'd mocked might be the smartest person in any room she entered. So, what now? Victoria asked. Now, I said, now we go watch Emma cut her wedding cake, and we celebrate her moment. I paused, then continued. Tomorrow, I have a board meeting with Microsoft to finalize the acquisition timeline. Next week, I'm giving a keynote at MIT, and next month, I'm testifying before Congress about national security and quantum technology. I looked around the circle of faces that, for years, had only seen one version of me. You're welcome to be part of that life, but only if you can accept that my definition of success might not look like yours. Across the hall, Jonathan Peton's voice carried over the music as he spoke to a group of executives. Revolutionary technology, brilliant young scientist, proud father. Must be. Dad heard it too. His shoulders lifted. For the first time in years, when he looked at me, I didn't see judgment or frustration. I want to understand, he said. Your work, your research, what you've built, I want to know. Then ask me real questions, I said. Not assumptions dressed as concern. Not advice disguised as disappointment. Ask. Marcus finally spoke, hesitant but genuine. The quantum error correction thing. Could you explain it in terms a finance guy might understand? I smiled. For the first time in 8 years, my brother wasn't dismissing me. He was curious. It was a start. As we began moving toward the cake cutting, Mom quietly slipped her arm through mine. Alexandra, she said, her voice lower now, unsure. Are you happy? Truly happy? I considered the question. Yes, Mom, I'm doing exactly what I'm meant to do, and I love it. She nodded slowly. Then I'm proud of you. And this time, I believed her. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Congratulations from extended family who suddenly remembered I existed. business cards from Dad's colleagues who now wanted meetings, and tentative but sincere questions from family who were finally seeing me for who I really was. But the moment that stayed with me came near the end, during a quiet song, when Dad pulled me aside. "I owe you an apology," he said, "not just for tonight, for everything. For all the years I didn't see what was right in front of me." "I know." He looked down, then back up. "How do I make it right?" I thought about the family dinners where I'd tried to explain quantum mechanics and was told I was being difficult. The years of subtle digs. The job offers I never asked for. The love made conditional on conformity. "Start by believing in me," I said, "even when you don't understand. Especially then." He nodded. "Deal." As the guests began to leave, Jonathan Petton approached once more. "Dr. Hartley," he said, lowering his voice, "this has been the most fascinating wedding I've ever attended. Your father is a very lucky man, whether he realizes it or not." "Thank you," I said. "One more thing," he added. "I meant what I said earlier. Meridian is eager to explore partnerships. Perhaps we could set something up?" "I'd be happy to. My assistant will reach out next week." He smiled and walked away. Dad stood beside me, speechless for a moment, then said, "That was Jonathan Petton, asking to collaborate with my daughter's company." "Yes," I said simply. "I'm beginning to realize I've underestimated you." "Just beginning?" I teased. He laughed, genuine, and for the first time, with me. As the car pulled away from the venue that night, I sat quietly, watching the city lights blur past the window. But it wasn't the usual silence filled with tension and unspoken disappointment. It was a new kind of quiet, one filled with possibility. My phone buzzed. "From Marcus. Can we do lunch this week? I want to really hear about your work, not just pretend to listen." Then Victoria, "I read your Forbes article. Didn't realize quantum computing could impact legal systems. Want to chat sometime?" Finally, from Mom, "I'm sorry it took this long to see you. I see you now. Love, Mom." I smiled. Tomorrow, I'd return to the life I built, the research, the meetings, the breakthroughs, but now, for the first time in years, I wouldn't be doing it alone. Because sometimes, the best kind of vindication isn't proving people wrong. It's giving them the chance to be proud of who you've always been, instead of disappointed in who they thought you should be. The Forbes cover was just the beginning. The real revolution had already started, one question at a time. One open mind at a time. One moment of real connection at a time. And finally, my family was ready to meet me. And this time, I was ready to let them.